On tonight's program, we have my friend from New York, Mike Figliola, on the show. Mike Figliola is a writer, a television radio reporter, and a producer who has called New York City, specifically Queens, his home for more than 30 years. And his new book, The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue, is available wherever fine books are sold. We're going to talk about his book, and a special for the audience. This has never been done on the program before. Mike will read a chapter from his book, The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue. That's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed the show. Here it is.
What the book is about is a snapshot into a neighborhood and a people and a part of Queens that normally you don't think about. New York City, when you think about New York City, you'll think about an area like Broadway, or you'll think about Soho. You may think of Midtown, and that's just in Manhattan. And in Queens, you may think of the big globe out there near Shea Stadium or Citi Field now, or you may think of Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. This part of Queens is Cypress Avenue in particular, is a sort of forgotten part of the borough. When you go down there, it's a melting pot that has changed over the years, a melting pot of people that has changed over the years, and a lot of working class, blue collar people that take the train every day and ride the bus and walk to work and that sort of thing. It's an area of fruit stands and bars and delis and liquor stores and sort of your normal fare. And I wanted to capture that part of New York, partly because I grew up hanging out in that area as a kid. I have family that live there, spend time there, still live there. And to me, I didn't want to romanticize it. I really wanted to write an authentic story about the people that live there. Now, listen, it's based on people. It's not this, you can go and meet Joe the butcher or Bill the milkman, but it's based on folks like that I met, and I wrote them into my book as such. So, there's a couple places that you can actually visit, and I like that. I feel like people like to connect with the stories that way. And so I wrote the book really to capture the neighborhood, the people, and sort of the folks that you wouldn't think about when you think a book about New York City.
We have Manhattanite, New Yorker. What would you call a Queens resident? A Queensian?
Yeah, Queensian or Queensite. We're just a bunch of blokes from Queens, I think that's really what it ends up at the end of the day. It's the most diverse place on the planet, from what I understand, in terms of ethnicity and culture and population as well. So, it's Queens is a series of neighborhoods, and this part of, a lot of Queens too are cemeteries, and I think I've spoken to you about this before, cemeteries and train tracks. And Cypress Avenue sits in the Ridgewood section of Queens, and it also straddles Brooklyn. So you can really run a bunch of parts of the borough and still pass through all these different neighborhoods and different people. So yeah, it's a bunch of neighborhoods. I'd say you're from Queens. That's how it works here.
So what do Queensians think of Manhattanites?
I think that we like to leave them there. We like to visit every once in a while, and then we like to stay in our borough. The cool thing about being in Queens is that the nightlife is just as good as going to any Manhattan spot, and it's a little cheaper. And you really get an interesting mix of people, different kind of cuisine, definitely different kind of nightlife. I mean, you've got everything from clubs and like dance halls and that kind of things to, they still have open beer gardens here. I don't know about your neck of the woods where you live, but they have an open beer garden where you can actually enjoy a beer outside in a beer garden. They have those kind of places. And it's nice to go to Manhattan now and again, but I find myself, as I'm getting older, just liking to stick to Queens and enjoying what they provide here. It's a great place.
Explain the meaning behind the title, The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue.
Sure, yeah. So I've probably told this story before a million times. I may have told it even to you offline, but the story started, the title of the book came from a poem that I wrote. The poem that I wrote is very much like the book, except condensed to about maybe a page or two worth of material. But it's a snapshot of a person sitting on their stoop, and I talk about stoops a lot in the book, waiting for the rain to stop so they can go meet their friends who are old neighborhood folks who live on Cypress Avenue at the local watering hole. And it's the emotions and thoughts of this person as they're sitting on the stoop waiting for the rain to end. By the end of the poem, the person, the speaker of the poem, decides that, screw the rain, I'm just going to go to the bar anyway, and kind of bounces off the stoop and goes into the night and heads down Cypress Avenue to meet his buddies and friends. And when I was reading this poem at an event, a friend of mine who I thanked in the book, his name is Michael Heiss, really another brilliant writer, good guy, local guy. He's a professor out at a college in Long Island, just a smart guy, said, if you don't take the title of that poem and write a book about it, I'm going to take that title and write the book. It's too good. And I think he meant it. He kind of scared me a little bit where he said, you have to write this. This is such a great epic title. And the context that, of the poem could be a huge novel. You're talking about these people that live in this part of the city that nobody cares about. And that's really what I was going for. And so the title, I jotted the title down at the top of a Word document. I stared at it for a while. And then the words came forward. The characters started coming forward. I didn't flesh them out too much. I did a little bit of draft before I really got into the book. I came up with some characters. I knew where I wanted to go with the story. And then I tell you, Russ, the book sort of wrote itself. It's from experience. It's from memories that I've had. And it's also I did some research for the book as well. And I put quotes in there when I say research, because I went down and sort of drank with the locals and sat on people's stoops and you walked around Cypress Avenue. And that's where the story came from. And I tried to make it as authentic as possible, but it really started as a poem. And a lot of my writing comes from that. I have all my journals saved, and every once in a while I'll dip in there. Even some of the titles of the chapters in the book, like Stories from St. Nicholas Avenue, They Break Our Legs and Give Us Crutches, those came from poems that I wrote. And I really thought I like epic titles for poems. Sometimes I write the title down first and the poem comes later. And that's what I did with the novel as well.
What comes first, the plot or the characters?
I would say the story would come first, but it's always born out of a title. The book I'm writing now, the way I started that one was I came up with an idea, I titled the book, and now I have a whole bunch of chapter titles that I'm basing revolving the plot around, which, were born out of my plot points that I was trying to build into the story. So
I've heard that, these masterclass writing courses that you're supposed to conceive the ending first and move your way backwards.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me. I never work that way. I never come up with the ending first. I have a general idea with the story, how the story's going to end, but I don't have a definitive ending. But I like the idea of coming up with a title, coming up with some plot points, coming up with some characters, and letting the creative juices take me almost like a wave. The wave is sort of ebbing and coming towards the shore, the shoreline being the end of the book. The wave is me, and it may take a couple of different turns and that kind of thing. That's how I like to write the book, especially with anything I write. That goes for anything creative I do, even in terms of music, in terms of writing, in terms of any kind of creative endeavor. I try to come up with something I like and let the creative juices take me there. And then usually I'll go back and say, hey, I could do this better or do that better, or let's rework this kind of thing. But for the most part, I like to just let it ride.
How do you maintain the theme throughout the book when you're not writing it in one go? Obviously, no one writes a book in one shot, but sometimes books take many months to write. I don't know. How long did it take you to write this book?
I would say about 7 months.
Right, so you're not necessarily the same person from month 1 to month 7. How do you maintain that continuity throughout the entire experience?
This book was a part of me. It still is a part of me. It was born out of experiences that I had and experiences I was researching while writing the book. So I was living it I was reliving a lot of it and having new experiences while I was writing it. And I think that's another very authentic way to do the kind of writing that I'm doing. You really need to be in the moment, and there's something called like gonzo journalism, right, where Hunter Thompson and those kind of guys went down that road. But I more look at it, I was more like observing and weaving in the past experiences that I have of the areas that I was observing, the people I was observing, into the actual moments I was observing now. So I tried to mix both of those things in together, which is why the book has an older feel to it, maybe like yesteryear. It seems a little out of time, But then when you get into it, you realize these are the same people. You would still see if you went to Cypress Avenue now, you would still see these same people floating around. Maybe not as prevalent as when I was, back in the 90s, but they're still there. Earl the Fisherman's there. There's definitely a Zogbee. That's the way I came up with Zogbee, who's one of the big focus of the book, was there was a guy who used to pass by a lot on my way home from a family's apartment from that area. He'd be always sitting on a stoop with a styrofoam cup staring with a World War II hat on. I said, and again, I switched it for timing purposes to make it the Korean War. But he had a World War II hat on with a styrofoam cup, and he would sit there and smoke a cigarette every day. And then one day he disappeared. And I said, what the hell happened to this guy? And he was never there anymore. So I don't know if he moved, he passed away, or just decided not to sit out there anymore. But that's where Zogbee came from, and that was kind of like I said, blending the past with the present.
The gentrification of Cypress Avenue, does that threaten the charm and uniqueness of the area?
It's a great question. So it hasn't touched Cypress Avenue proper yet. The surrounding areas a little bit away from that area, going into Brooklyn and into Queens, because part of Ridgewood has become very gentrified. There was a time when the apartments in Ridgewood and the housing in Ridgewood was dirt cheap, and you had a mix of folks in there who were not making a lot of money and sort of living hand to mouth, And as parts of Brooklyn, which you've probably read about in the papers or been sort of romanticized on TV, like Williamsburg and Greenpoint, the rents are skyrocket now, and it's sort of, at one time when Heath Ledger was alive, he lived there with his wife. All these sort of celebrities and celebutantes or whatever kind of moved in there. People who couldn't afford it anymore in Brooklyn moved into Ridgewood. And like I said, Cypress Avenue is one of those avenues that straddle Brooklyn and Queens. And they kind of passed over Cypress Avenue, which really makes me laugh because Cypress Avenue is the same as the other avenues that they moved into, Fairview or Grandview or Fresh Pond Road or any of those avenues that lead down going into deeper into Queens. And I like that because, to your point, it still has the same charm as the 70s, right? It's the same kind of area. It's changed somewhat. But if you walk through there, it still feels the same to me as when I was a kid. And I had brought this up on another interview I did. I was really hoping that this book would, today, and I'm sure in a lot of major cities and across the country, a lot of people don't talk to their neighbors anymore. And I think that's a sad commentary that we don't know our neighbors. When I was growing up, you could ring your neighbor's bell and they'd be looking out for you, or if you ever had an emergency. And I don't think today that rings the same. And Cypress Avenue, when it was basically the same growing up there, and it still holds to me that kind of familiarity where you can still know your neighbor and the person next door. You can knock on their door and you get some sugar if you run out of it. And I hope that this book, and I tried to put that in this book, but these people are neighbors. They all know each other for good or worse, better or worse. If they in the good and the bad, they still are neighbors, and they like that. That's why one of the last scenes in the book, they're all sitting together at a bar. All of them that you've met in different chapters who haven't met before are sitting together, kind of reminiscing about the day. And I hope that people will do that still. Where they'll not at a bar. They don't have to do it at a bar, but maybe they'll sit on their stoop or they'll sit on their front porch and say, hey, why don't you come over for a lemonade or a beer or let's share a story or two, because I think we're missing that today. This country's divided enough politically. It's divided enough socially with a lot of unrest. I think that we need to bring that together. And this book, despite its darkness, it's got a lot of light moments and a lot of funny exchanges between people. And I hope when people read that, they may want to say, hey, I want to know Joe the postman, or like I wrote about him in the book and other folks. So that was it. Cypress Avenue still has its charm, but I can see it's one day, people moving back on up and say, all right, it's time to take over Cypress Avenue, raise those rents.
Yeah, the key to any conflict resolution is to focus on the things that we have in common. I think that would be a great recipe for some of what ails the United States right now.
Absolutely. I think that we need to, know we have differences and know that we can all live together among them and be okay with it, and that's be tolerant, be accepting, and just be like, look, we're all Americans. That's at the end of the day, wherever your ideology lands, or Canadians or however you want to put it.
Or you love baseball and you can focus on that or whatever. Not to bring up the Mets.
Bring them up, go ahead.
Why do the Mets suck so badly?
Why are you asking? These are the questions that you need to ask philosophers, man. I do not know. All I know is I can tell you, Russ, I can't quit them. No matter what I do, every year I'm sitting there with my Mets jersey on and my hat and my "Let's Go Mets" chant. I just watch it and I cry. That's about it. But I love them. They're hey, it's a part of. I was basically baptized at then Shea Stadium. So.
Best pizza in Queens.
Okay, in where I live in the Maspeth Middle Village area, it's look, it goes by town. Everyone's got their favorite spot. It would be Rose's Pizza here on Metropolitan Avenue in like 79th Street. The pizza there, the granny slice, the sauce, the cheese. I mean, look, it's bar none. Everyone's could argue. This is my take. I don't care. I'm sticking to it. However, I would say that Spumoni Gardens in Brooklyn, an avenue, I don't know, you or one of those avenues near Coney Island, it is just a gem, a treasure. If you make it back here, Russ, you need to go. Make it one of your pit stops. It will change your life. The sauce is like crack. I don't know what's in it, but I can't. You want to drink it. You want to slurp it down with a straw. I mean, it's that good. And then it's just it's an old school place. It's been here a long time. A lot of memories. It's a part of Brooklyn. It should be a landmark if it's not already. And those are the two I would say. Rose's in Queens on Metropolitan and 79th Street, and then make it out to near Coney Island and get to Spumoni Gardens. L&B Spumoni Gardens. That's the official title.
I only eat cheese pizza. Sometimes pepperoni if I'm feeling really adventurous.
Now, what about, is it the triangle slice or is it the granny? Where are you falling at?
What do you mean what do you mean?
You like a regular triangle slice or do you like the squares?
Oh, triangle, for sure. Squares like Chicago, no?
Deep dish, correct. Yeah, it is. Yeah. But here in New York, we don't go that deep. We kind of keep it real.
No, deep dishes. No, I like the thin crust. No, the reason I like cheese pizza is because that way, everywhere I go, I order a cheese pizza and I can compare them sort of scientifically.
What is Canadian pizza like? I've never had that.
It's nowhere near as good as New York pizza at all. I mean, most people still order, I don't know if you have it there, but Panagopoulos, Pizza Hut, Domino's.
Right. Your chains.
Yeah, that's garbage.
Right.
Will there be a follow-up to The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue?
It's in the works right now. I will break some news on your show. The title of the book is called Fine is Flying Without You. It is a sister companion book to this one, where it's set in the same neighborhood in town. I have a couple other ideas that are on the burner, which are fleshed out right now that just need to be written, that are completely separate from this book and a different world and different topics and everything. But I really thought that if this book takes off, which it seems like it's doing pretty well, my readers might want to stick with this, might want another dose of this, just sort of enjoy their time in another part of Queens. This book, like I said, it's called Fine is Flying Without You. It is a similar story in terms of character development and folks and neighborhoods and sights and sounds that belong to Queens, exclusively to Queens. But it takes you on a journey with the protagonist who is questioning his life, his choices, where he is, and he decides he's just going to leave home and sort of take on his old haunts, relive his life. So his kind of line was, "Fine is flying without you. I don't need anybody. I'm fine." And he may learn that he may not be. That's the gist of what I'm working on right now, which will be some of the faces in The Slow Midnight may pop up in this book as well.
So be a part of the same universe.
Correct. Yeah, it's like a sister book, companion book.
Who's your favorite character in Slow Midnight?
I have a few. I really enjoyed writing the Father John White character because it gave me time to write in a sort of southern drawl of this sort of fake guy who's a quote-unquote priest and shady guy in general. The Zogbee character as well, because I really like writing miserly, angry people. Not because I am, just because it's a little departure from where I normally sit. I really enjoyed writing the Lolly and Lorraine characters because it was interesting to try to write from two young girls' perspective on how they view the world and what's important to them. So I would say those three characters were my favorite. I guess Zogbee, at the end of the day, sort of is the centerpiece of the book. When you read through it, you realize he's the linchpin, that everything else happens because of him. and I wanted to include it in the book.
Mike Figliola will now read from the book The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue. He's reading Chapter 4. If you're following at home, it's page 37, and the name of the chapter is They Call Him Corporal Benjamin Zogbee.
All right, Russ, so we're going to read from Part 4 of Book 1 of The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue. Book 1 is called Morning. Part 4 is a chapter called They Called Him Corporal Benjamin Zogbee. This is one of the pivotal chapters in the book. This pretty much is the linchpin that sets the rest of it on fire and sort of drives the plot and a lot of plot points. So here it is. They call him Corporal Benjamin Zogbee. Lorraine sat quietly on the bottom step of her gray-painted stoop. She surveyed the length of Cypress Avenue, taking in the telephone poles and the long, black, sleek wires that were suspended high above the avenue like a circus tightrope. The poles and wire cables lined every street for miles and miles. Lorraine imagined herself being shrunk down to the size of a squirrel and running along those wires, passing over stoops that looked just like her own. She sometimes dreamed that she could run on those wires far away from Cypress Avenue, but she also knew they would just lead her to another avenue, just like this one, with a misnomer for a name. Such avenues like Forest and Grandview, Fairview, St. Nicholas Avenues, none of which boasted a Grand or Fairview or bore any resemblance to a forest, and certainly did not house any saints. There was also Onderdonk Avenue, but what the hell was an Onderdonk? Lorraine sighed, then sat quietly again, this time listening. In the apartment building next door, her neighbors were yelling at one another. About what, she wasn't quite sure, but it was louder than usual. They had left the front windows of the first-floor railroad apartment open this time. They were a not-so-young couple who took to yelling at one another almost every day, since as far back as Lorraine could remember. What they argued about never made sense. They just didn't seem to like each other much. Usually the arguing was just some muffled ambient noise that mixed in with the half-chirping birds and the rolling engines of passing cars and buses, the usual sounds of Cypress Avenue. An old car, slow moving, rolled by, and Lorraine turned her eyes to where the wheels had once been. Cypress Avenue had unremarkable streets. They were dotted with rusting sewer caps and flanked by aging sewer grates. Cigarette butts lined the gutters like confetti, while gum tar and pressed bottle caps splashed across the length of the avenue. It could have been a Jackson Pollock painting. Lorraine looked to the sidewalks to see if they meant something different. They didn't. The sidewalks led to stoops that led to linoleum-lined stairs that led to sixth-floor walk-ups. Lorraine was sick of sixth-floor walk-ups. She was sick of sixth-floor walk-downs. The apartments were hot and full of bugs, and they were everywhere. She wanted out. Maybe it would be okay to visit now and again. She liked the train tracks and the trolley rails that would sometimes peek out from the worn, paved-over cobblestone roads. The schoolyards with their silver-painted fencing that sometimes had swing sets sitting behind them that she could swoosh back and forth on through the Ridgewood air, high enough to almost touch those phone pole wires. Bodegas and laundromats her mother frequented lined the corners of every few blocks, and the corners after that were topped with bus stops where buses rarely showed up. The opened and now milked Johnny pumps were in between those corners. Lorraine hated corners. She had been hanging around them long enough. Corners and mechanic chop shops and Irish bars and Polish bars and bars that didn't identify with one heritage at all. Just sloppy joints full of sloppy people. The entire neighborhood that Cypress Avenue filled seemed to be its facsimile, all gray and on repeat from one end to the other. Lorraine had enough now. She wanted out, and this time she meant it. This time more than the last. Slam! The neighbor's window crashed shut. The yelling continued, but back to its usual muffle. The funny thing was, the birds had never stopped chirping. It all seemed so normal. Just then, frantic footsteps raced towards Lorraine's stoop. She looked up. It was Lolly. Her hair waved wildly around her face while she smiled and laughed through huge intakes of air. She grabbed Lorraine's hand and yanked her up. Run! He's after me! Startled, Lorraine got up and took off with Lolly, giggling and yelling right behind her. The two girls both ran across the sidewalks that Lorraine hated, and jumped over the gutters that Lorraine hated, and drifted across the streets that Lorraine hated, in a wild marathon sprint down the length of Cypress Avenue. Behind them, angry yells from Old Man Fu echoed off the cramped-together railroad apartment buildings until they made enough space between their steps and his yells. The racket gradually faded away into bird chirping, neighbor yelling, and car rumbling of the avenue. The girls stopped running and immediately plopped down against the brown Mr. T dumpster that was chained and locked to the storefront of 12 Sons Deli. It had to be chained and locked there because every few weeks someone would show up and try to steal it. No one knew who or why someone would steal a dumpster, but it was always found later the following day only a few blocks away. Ralph, the owner of 12 Sons Deli. By the way, 12 Sons Deli is a real deli. You can find it, if you Google map it, it's over there on, probably on like Forest Avenue. Anyway, so Ralph, the owner of 12 Sons Deli, would look over the metal barge, grunt a little, wheel it back to the storefront, and place it back where it belonged without a word. Now it was locked up. No one had tried to steal it since. It all seemed so normal. Both girls were catching their breath now, Lolly still laughing through what sounded like a smoker's cough. A pair of elderly women shuffling along the sidewalk didn't look their way, but scoffed as they walked by. Lolly just stuck her tongue out at them. They kept going. No one ever stopped. It was best to keep walking until you got off this avenue. Lorraine collected herself and slowly looked up to the green-painted street signs to see exactly where they were. It was the corner of Cypress Avenue and Woodbine. Another goddamn corner, Lorraine thought to herself. A bird landed on the phone wires above and chirped. Lorraine sighed. It was time to find out why Lolly was running away from Old Man Fu. When she finally asked, Lolly belted a few coughs and half-laughs. Then she shook her head no. It's a long story, and it isn't really that funny. Lorraine nodded. She was probably right. There was no need to talk about what just happened. None of it was very funny anymore. It used to all be funny. But that was when Lolly and Lorraine had first met. That was now almost 3 years ago. Everything had become so changeless. Here they were again, playing hooky from summer school, standing on another corner laughing at some stupid nonsense. Lorraine was tired of the usual neighborhood banter. It was all the same changeless gray. She stood up and turned to Lolly with something new. Guess what? Lolly stared at her. No man is innocent. I'm going to get that tattooed on my right shoulder in black ink. Lolly coughed. Why? I don't know. My uncle says that a lot. Which uncle? Your dad's or your mom's brother? My dad's brother would never be clever enough to say something like that aloud, even if he could dream up such a thing. I don't care how many PhDs he has. How many does he have? Lorraine sighed. Just one, but it doesn't matter. It's my mom's brother who said it anyway. Oh, he's kind of old, right? Yeah, well, not that old. I saw your uncle sitting on the stoop a few times. I was walking home from school and he was out there just staring. I think it was him. Did he have a styrofoam cup and a cap on? I think so. Well, that was him. Oh, he's old and cute. Lorraine stared at the green-painted street signs. I wonder what he meant. About what? About all men not being innocent. Wasn't he in the Army? I think the Marines. Well, maybe he was talking about that. About the Army? Lolly coughed and laughed again. No, about men and war and shit like that. I don't know what he meant. I just really like the way it sounds. No man is innocent. Me too. Actually, no one is innocent. Lolly pointed at Lorraine. Except you, you virgin. You're a virgin too. Not for long. But, well, maybe you're right. We are all innocent. Lorraine didn't understand the remark. How do you figure that? Lolly leaned against the dumpster and fiddled with the block before she spoke. It's because we really only live life once and everything that happens is for the first time, right? You can't be born more than once or die more than once or even walk down the same street the same way more than once. So everyone is one take, no do-overs. Therefore, we are innocent. Where's this coming from? I don't know. I was just thinking about it and it came out. We are all innocent. First-time offenders for life. You're just trying to let yourself off the hook for whatever it is you're feeling guilty about. We all make excuses, and in that excuse we can be innocent. Well, according to my uncle, not men. I wonder why. Lorraine walked over and leaned on the dumpster now, too, her face close to Lolly's. Hey, let's go ask him. Yeah, you should ask him what the hell he means before you tattoo it on your arm. Hey, maybe he will give us a beer. Definitely. I drank a few with him last Thanksgiving. He lives just 15 blocks from here. Let's just walk the tracks. It's quicker. One thing, though. He will want us to call him Corporal, not Uncle, okay? Why? I don't know. Even my mom calls him Corporal now. His name is Benjamin, but he doesn't like anything but Corporal. Should I salute him too? Just be nice. They made their way to the opening in a metal fence that encompassed the freight train tracks. The wooden boards were brown and warm, the rails not so much. Lolly and Lorraine always stayed off them despite there being no electricity running through the American-bred steel. Lorraine liked to kick the place gravel about as she walked and talked, paying close attention to the sounds reaching out from the distance. Most time it was the train, or even a patrol car that somehow got down to the freight lines to Foxhound transients. The pair never knew exactly where the rails ultimately led to. Sometimes they'd say off them, then run through the blades of unmanicured grass and wild brush into the ever-present expanse of suburb and city, yelling to each other that they had to just make it out and get away. When the danger was quite far behind them, they'd step into the sunlight and sit in an Aborigine park full of worn picnic tables. They were once painted red, but now they sit winter-chipped and devoid of dinner. The table stood, a lone testament to the first kisses of coming-of-age girls and boys, right off the main drag of their parents' fairway and the final cut of summertime. Today the tracks led to Lorraine's Uncle Benjamin's apartment. The girls held hands as a wind kicked up a little and whooshed through the tops of the tree leaves. The birds were silent. Next part. This is where Zogbee comes in now. So the girls are on their way to Zogbee's house after all that, and Zogbee will now give you his take on the world. So this is the next part of the chapter. We're still in the Zogbee chapter. I'm going to do some Zogbee voice too, so it'll be fun. Zogbee rubbed his hand across his chin. He was watching the ash on the end of his cigarette grow. It was quite long now. Below the hand that held the cigarette was his foam-white cup full of Schmidt's beer. He didn't move his hand for fear the ash would fall into suds and the ash could make its way to the concrete below. Zogbee just waited and watched. Something would have to give soon enough. An engine roar and a squeak of air brakes sounded just across the street. Zogbee didn't move his head but tipped his eyes upward, away from the ash gaze, to watch the big wheels come to rest in front of his bus stop. No one got off, no one got on. The bus waited a moment, its doors open and its engines off. Perhaps it waited for Zogbee. He thought of that for a moment before rubbing his chin and turning his eyes back to his ashen beer. The engine turned back on, the doors closed, and the wheels turned back to the road. Out of the corner of his eye, a woman darted out of the corner store and ran down the street shouting at the bus, "Wait! Wait!" Her black shoes kicked through the puddles and pus of Ridgewood streets, her arms outstretched. She knew as much as anyone else that the next bus would be an hour or so away during midday. She had to make this bus. Dust and exhaust kicked up right into her outstretched arms, but she ran even faster, screaming after the bus, "Wait! Wait! No!" Zogbee watched as her feet fell underneath one another and her chest slammed down into the ground, skidding her body across the wet walkway. She lay motionless. When she finally moved again, she screamed and cursed into the fresh exhaust, her mouth now pressed against the sidewalk and inadvertently lapping up rainwater. She lay there for a moment before picking herself up and looked at Zogbee. Her finger pointed straight at him, and its end dripped with puddle water. "You saw me coming! You could have stopped the bus! You saw me!" Zogbee looked back down into the ash. It hadn't fallen off his cigarette yet. That was luck. His eyes turned back up to the woman. She was crying and staring at her hands now. She checked her watch and punched her leg. There was nothing she could do but walk in the direction of the bus. Zogbee took the white styrofoam cup and brought it to his mouth. He swallowed. Then he looked at his cigarette. The ash was gone. Zogbee looked into his drink and rubbed his chin. It all goes to the same place, he thought. The apartment building Zogbee lived in faced the street, and across from there it faced another identical apartment building. He never noticed anyone coming or going from that side of Cypress Avenue. He had lived in the same building for the last 45 years, raised his family on the food the side street market stands offered, had picnics in the Cypress Cemetery, which always doubled as a park for working stiffs with little pocket money, and had 2 children blessed and baptized at St. Aloysius Church. He and his family were mutts, living among the German and Irish who embedded the area during the Roaring Twenties. Zogbee adjusted the brim of his cap and smoothed the fingers across the stitched yellow thread that carried across the top. It wasn't in Braille, although at times he thought it might be. No one ever noticed the large letters that spelled out U.S. Army Veteran, and underneath Korea 68-71 blazed with eagles holding the American flag in their beaks. He rubbed his hands down to the back of his neck and reached down for the styrofoam cup again. "No one gives a steaming crap," he muttered into the white mouth of the cup. He opened his eyes and noticed an image reflecting in the gold liquid. It wasn't his. It was Betty's. She was smiling, her lips painted bright red and parted just enough to show the light stains on her young teeth. Her brown curls fell across her shoulders and onto her breast, curls Zogbee used to run his fingers through to try to straighten out. Betty would just laugh at him. "You can't straighten those curls out, you bum." But it did not matter. He tried anyway. Her hair was long and full, but it did not cover the silver necklace that carried a heart pendant Zogbee gave her on their third and final date. He asked her for her hand in marriage the next morning. Betty agreed. Her father did not. Zogbee and Betty signed the license at City Hall the next day. She was 17. He was 19. The following week he shipped out to some foreign land where he did not speak the language or understand the ramifications of warfare. Betty sent him letters. He sent some back. She read the ones her father didn't intercept and throw in the incinerator. He sent her a picture of him with some of the boys from his unit. Betty hid that picture under the pillow during the night and the mattress during the day. At least that's what she told him when he returned almost 2 years later, 1952. The door of his apartment building opened behind him, startling him out of his daydream. He reached into his shirt's right front pocket and felt inside. The photograph was still there. He pressed it hard against his chest and slowly turned around. It was Father John White. "That cigarette's gone out, Corporal. Want another one?" Zogbee looked down at his fingers and found just a filter between them. He frowned before he answered. "I only smoke Kents. You smoke that hippie Indian crap." Father White laughed. "Well, I shouldn't smoke anything, but if I do, I reckon it's the hippie Native American tobacco, yes. Fine morning, ain't it?" Zogbee turned his head away and reached for his lighter. He flicked it on and let it go out. "I was a-watching from my window and saw that poor young lady take a full run in for that bus. Such a shame. Bus driver has got no manners at all." Zogbee turned to Father White, who was now standing with his hands on his hips. He was wearing a white Sunday suit with a pocket watch and chain in his coat pocket. His thick cologne was of the Old Spice variety. It masked the cigarettes and scotch. Zogbee rubbed his chin. "Preacher, you moved to New York from Alabama about 25 years ago. How is it you still speak with that southern slang? You should be speaking Spanish by now to live in this neighborhood." "Oh, well, some things you just can't get rid of. It's in my bones now, like, well, breathing. I don't even think about it." "You should start thinking about it," Zogbee muttered into his cup again. A sense of irritation came over his body. He never liked Father John. He was a full-of-shit preacher always looking for a handout that was not for the poor but for himself. The world wouldn't miss a man like that, no matter if he was of the proverbial cloth or of the blue-collar kind. Zogbee instinctively reached for his left shirt pocket and felt the compact shape hidden beneath the blue plaid. He always had it there. There was a photograph in his right pocket and this in the other. They both had uses, and he thought about them often, sometimes at the same time. Father John had his face up to the sky smiling. Zogbee moved his hand away from his left pocket and thought he better not. "Yeah, me and the South still have a love affair, I reckon. I'll be buried next to my pappy when I die." "Your pappy?" "That's right. My ma now, she's still alive. God bless her." Father White made the sign of the cross and kissed his hand before he raised it to the sky. "And she and my pappy, well, they ain't never got along. Oh, boy, she and him would fight and fight through the summers and the winters. She told me, 'John, when I die, I ain't never going to be buried next to your pappy, because even in the grave we just disagree.'" "Your pappy?" "Yeah, she and my pappy." Zogbee lit up another cigarette and blew the smoke into the air. He wished Father White would go to church or heal the sick or whatever it was he did during the day. At night, Zogbee knew what he was up to. That was the real Father White. This version was watered down and filtered through the lens of expectation and dollar signs. "I'm on my way to the church, Corporal. Why don't you come on by today? Do you some good." Father John laid his hand on Zogbee's shoulder. "We could light a candle for Betty." Zogbee sucked on the cigarette deep and followed up with a swig from the styrofoam cup. He blew out a huge smoke and coughed. "No." Betty wasn't dead. She might as well be. At least that's what he told everybody. "Well, I'll say a prayer for her today, and you too, Corporal. God bless you. I'll see you later." Father John tugged on his jacket and walked down the stoop steps onto the sidewalk. The overpowering scent of Old Spice hit Zogbee's nose. He didn't flinch. He never did. Father White disappeared down the length of Cypress Avenue into the thickening morning fog, his white suit still visible along the red brake lights of cars waiting for the traffic light to turn green. It grew quiet. Zogbee flicked the lighter on and watched the flames sway and move ever so slightly. He let it go out and put it back in his right shirt pocket. It lay right next to the photograph now. Betty, he whispered to himself. The fog slowly moved down Cypress Avenue, filling the air in front of his apartment building. The street was empty now. No cars, no buses, no falling ladies, no preachers. No one to give a flying steaming crap about anything. My Betty. Zogbee rubbed his chin as he set down the styrofoam cup. He reached into the pocket now and touched the photograph. It was smooth and glossy under his fingers. It felt good. He quickly pulled it out and brought it close to his eyes. It was a worn black and white photo of him and Betty standing together on a bench next to an old clam shack. Written in black ink across the white bottom of the photo it read, "To my most favorite Betty and Ben in the world, may that world be your oyster, clam." Zogbee smiled and looked up into the fog. The scent of Old Spice had morphed into saltwater air, the stoop into sea-worn boardwalk covered in hot tan sand, the dark of Cypress Avenue into sunlit Cross Bay Boulevard. Zogbee himself felt lighter, fit, and free. He heard Betty's big laugh. A warmth came over him as he felt the ghost grip of her small hand in his. She was a fragile woman in body, no more than 5 feet tall, and full of soft features. Her cheeks were dotted by 2 dimples, her brown eyes surrounded by nearly visible freckles. Eyelashes were thick and batted constantly between moments of conversation. Zogbee's mind flooded with images. The beach was full again. There was Sonny's Clam Shack and Dominic's hot dogs truck alongside the boulevard. Next to them was Kenneth Wayne's bait and tackle shop, where you could grab a soda and a bucket of snails for $2. Full-figured men and women lay on the beach towels under umbrellas, munching on freshly barbecued hamburgers and bay shrimp. There were children everywhere, some diving off the pier, others digging for clams in the sand, both stalked by seagulls and hungry hermit crabs. Betty loved the beach. She loved it all. Maybe she loved too much. Betty. Zogbee mouthed her name, but not a whisper came out. The day was full of clam slurping and ocean swimming. Betty fancied herself a fisherman, so they spent 2 good hours perched on the pier with poles and lines deep into the bay, hoping to hook a good eating fish or two. She would cast spells into the sea airs to send fish their way. It never worked. Betty never gave in. It will work, you bum. You wait and see. You bum, Zogbee whispered. No fish came, and they didn't care. They were married for 5 years at the time. A deep male voice entered the air. It hovered over the clam shack and the sand like a cloud crossing the sun. My most favorite Betty and Ben in the world. No face, just a voice. Zogbee looked around. Betty was gone. The air grew colder. A plane roared overhead. Screech! Zogbee was startled to see a large blue bus stopped in front of his stoop. The doors opened. A young boy exited through the back door and hopped on his skateboard. The doors closed and the bus pulled away into the now dissipating fog. Zogbee rubbed his chin again and whispered, Betty. Uncle? Zogbee looked up. It was his niece Lorraine. He didn't answer her. Corporal? Zogbee reached down for his styrofoam cup and put the cigarette to his mouth. He pulled on it. Nothing. He thought perhaps the cigarette went out. All that was left was a filter. Damn it, he muttered. Are you okay, Corporal? Zogbee reached around for his cigarettes. Shouldn't you be in school? Lorraine looked at Lolly. Lolly took over. No, sir, Corporal, sir. We have Veterans Day off today. Lorraine hit Lolly in the arm. They both giggled. Zogbee did not giggle. Today isn't Veterans Day. Don't you see that I'm wearing a veteran's hat? Lolly shrugged. So, sir? So don't you think I might know when Veterans Day is? Lorraine pushed Lolly aside and took over. We played hooky today. We want to get tattoos. Lolly laughed and jumped in front of Lorraine. No, your niece wants to get a tattoo, not me. And it's a tattoo of something you said, sir. Zogbee grunted and sipped on the suds. They didn't do much to hush up the children, just to quiet the mind for a short time. What's that? Lorraine was pointing at the photograph. Zogbee, forgetting the photo was still out, panicked, and shoved it back into his front pocket without answering. Ooh, an old picture. Lorraine, I love old pictures. Can we see it, Corporal, Uncle Sir? Zogbee stared at Lolly. He rubbed his chin and reached back into his shirt right pocket, produced a lighter, and lit it right in Lolly's face. She jumped back and screamed a little. Lorraine giggled. Zogbee let the flame die and put the lighter away. He turned his head and noticed that Lorraine had sat on the stoop right next to him. Can I have a beer, Corporal? How old are you, 7? Oh, 15. And how old are you? Lolly saluted him. I'm 21, sir. Zogbee reached around the back and threw a beer at Lolly. Lorraine stood up and yelled in protest. Hey, she's not 21. Lolly cracked the top and took a sip, laughing. You're not 21. I'm serious. She is not 21. Zogbee shrugged and turned to his niece. She said she was. Well, so am I. You said you were 15. I'm 21. We don't lie on Veterans Day, my dear. Lolly laughed and drank the beer. Her face changed a little as the suds hit the back of her tongue. The beer was warm and it tasted old. She gagged a little. Zogbee looked at her and reached back for his lighter. Lolly put the beer down. She felt sick and annoyed now. Lorraine, just tell him about the tattoo. Yes, Lorraine, tell me about it. Zogbee fumbled for another cigarette. I don't know. I think I'm just going to go home. Lorraine turned to Lolly, who was now trying to spit any taste of the beer from her mouth into the street. Oh, darling, let me know before you go. I'll get you a beer. Lorraine looked back at Lolly. She was bent over and mumbling. No thanks, Lorraine decided. Zogbee shrugged. Lorraine looked at her watch and decided to get on with it. Well, it was something Mama told me you said once. Your mama? I said a lot of stuff to your mama. She said you told her a long time ago. Everything is a long time ago. Hell, your friend the drunk over there is an old 21. Lolly was still spitting into the street. Mama told me you told her after Aunt Betty disappeared. A plane roared overhead, its engines muffling Lorraine's voice. Zogbee pointed to his ears. Speak up. Those damn planes. Lorraine sighed. She was frustrated with the whole thing. She didn't care when he said it or why he said it. She cared only that it had some meaning before she inked the words onto the fleshy part of her shoulder. The sound of the plane faded into the distance. Okay. Did you say to Mama that no man is innocent? The words caused Zogbee's hands to shudder. The cigarette fell, rolled off the stoop, and sank into the wet sidewalk. An ugly pain came over his stomach, like a fishhook, to the cheek. The once scent of ocean brine turned to a smoldering soot. He could not stop it. Betty. The deep voice from his daydream drifted into his head again. The best Betty in the world. The best Ben. The best Ben in the world. The best beds of other men. Other men. Zogbee's trembling hand reached for the styrofoam cup and it brought into his now dry lips for relief, but it began to crush it as his fingers clenched. The beach scene was gone. Zogbee remembered it all now. Uncle? Call me Corporal. Did you say that to Mama? Her eyes remained fixated on the suds. That's right, I did. Lolly backed away a bit. Lorraine, is he okay? A sense of cold filled the air and the two girls looked around them. The fog seemed to be rolling back down the avenue. Zogbee looked up at Lorraine and rubbed his chin. He noticed how much she reminded him of Betty. Small, fragile, mostly sweet, full of life. He rubbed his front left shirt pocket. It was still there, hard, cold, waiting. He felt his right pocket. She was there too. Betty. How he missed Betty. Lorraine looked around as the fog squeezed the avenue tightly. He motioned for Lorraine to come closer to him. As the fog grew thicker, Zogbee reached into his front left pocket. Then he spoke. I hoped you would be here when the truth came out. What truth, Uncle? The best truth one can be taught before they graduate high school. I don't understand. You will. Lolly tugged on Lorraine's arm. Lorraine, let's just get out of here. Lolly turned and kicked the beer over that Zogbee gave her. Lorraine looked back at her uncle. Will I know why no man is innocent? You already know. But I'm scared that I know. I am too. A scream and a gunshot rang at the same time. The bus rushed across Cypress Avenue. The bus passed the stop. No one got off. Maybe the woman that fell would finally get on up ahead. It's a hefty maybe. No one really gave a flying steaming crap anyway. It was good now. The truth came out. The street was empty again.
One of your favorite writers, I know this about you, is Rod Serling. Did he influence you in any way?
Rod is one of the geniuses of our time. If you don't take the time to watch Twilight Zone or get yourself immersed in Rod's work, you're missing out. All of it, and his character development, the people in his stories are these flawed and heroic. I mean, one of the great episodes is Steel, where where man has to overcome machine and he just can't. And I think it's a great commentary of the time, of the evolving times in the 60s, and and I think that might have been the late 50s that episode was written. But either way, in an evolving time of technology, and I think that episode was so prescient to the time, and also looking, to where we are now. Man's ability to overcome, right? And at the time, machine was really taking over. There was all types of things happening. There was hope to go to the moon at some point, and that's where all the science fiction was born out of. This hope to journey into space, and eventually through Robert Kennedy, and later on in '69. I'm sorry, excuse me, John F. Kennedy, not Robert Kennedy. Later on with John F. Kennedy, and into 1969 when they finally did make it to the moon. That was the hope, and machine took us there. And so Serling had the ability to see into the future while grounding his characters while in the present. And then he also, one of the great things about Serling, and I did the same thing with my book, or was influenced by that, was this longing to be able to go home again, another chance at everything. He's written about it multiple times across the board. And I think the characters in that book, my book, The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue, have that same feeling about them, that they want to be, as much as how horrible it is, maybe you don't remember it a certain way. There's that episode of the Incredible World of Horace Ford, where he keeps remembering his youth as this sort of nostalgic and blissful time, until he really goes back there and realizes he was getting beat up and the kids didn't like him, and he realizes the present might be the best for him. And there's that episode. And then you have Walking Distance, which is the opposite, right? Where it's a similar event. There's this other episode too, a Stop at Willoughby, which may be the best example of it, where the character just wants to escape reality and go back to a simpler time. And I tried to put those moments in my book as well, where these people are content to be, even though this avenue to other folks may be a hell, they're just happy to be alive and together on this place in a simpler time for them. So, to your original question there, Serling is must see, must read, and if you're not, you're missing out.
I've never seen Tales from the Dark Side. They've never shown it here in Canada.
Tales from the Dark Side is its own monster, right? So I would just, no pun intended. It is a sci-fi anthology series that has a lot of campy elements. Some episodes are sort of a head scratcher, but at the end of the day, I think that they really were encompassing and highlighting a time in cinema and TV world that is perfect for that genre and that series. If you watch that series, it really makes sense that it was 1983. It really makes sense it was 1984. It really makes sense it was 1985. It captures that time. There's a bunch of episodes that really come out of that. And the elements of it they have some lessons. It's very, it has some elements of Serling-esque type scripts in it. And then it has some really essence of horror. And that actual series transformed into another one called Monsters, which is not as good at all. But it's still kept in the same vein. But I would say Tales from the Dark Side, you can definitely get it online if you could do the DVD thing, or you might be able to buy it on Prime episode by episode. And definitely amazing stories. Those are the two that you should get into a little bit, that are outside of your normal fare of Outer Limits or whatever else you're watching. One of the things that inspired me with The Slow Minute on Cypress Avenue was, speaking of movies and in general, was Quentin Tarantino and Pulp Fiction. So why Pulp Fiction? Why Quentin Tarantino? Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Tarantino's work across the board. I really loved the concept in Pulp Fiction of the standalone vignettes that made the movie, and they all kind of threaded together. Although they if you look at it, they really could stand alone, right? I mean, you need all of them to make the movie, but if you wanted to dip into any chapter in that movie, anywhere. Same thing. And Kill Bill's a little different, it's a little more linear. But Pulp Fiction really broke that ground and made these vignettes that made up the movie. And I loved the idea of it so much that when I was writing The Slow Midnight on Cypress Avenue, I wanted to sort of see if it would work in book form, right? Where it wouldn't be so confusing to the people reading. And you've read the book, so you know. It's really, each chapter could be its own, like the Sun's chapter, for example, could be its own short story. And I really love the idea of that. And Quentin is a master, he's a genius. Maybe he'll read my book and want to do something with it. But, wink, wink, hey, Quentin, call me. But, that being said, I really love the idea of the standalone vignette that makes up the whole, because it gives you, as a writer, such a freedom to explore you can talk in any, speak in a voice, you can speak in a tense. I tried to do omniscient narrator with first person, third person. I really enjoyed that. It gave me freedom every day to almost write a different book every single day while keeping in the same motif and the same vein of what I was doing. And, without seeing Quentin's work in Pulp Fiction, without seeing that movie, I may not have done that. I was trained as I went to college, and I had in my college I had a writing scholarship, and I learned you write linear. You write the story flows. You have some sort of arc, and that what's that graph where it's sort of like the arc that goes up and down, that kind of thing with a triangle. You have your climax and your prologue and your the action. So Pulp Fiction and Tarantino in general just taught me that you could do something different, not just in cinema. You could put it in book form. There may be other books written that way. I don't know. I haven't read them, but I really was inspired to do that with my book, and I think it translated well. I've gotten a good response, and I like how you dipped into everyone's life, and it was a different snapshot of Cypress Avenue. There were those who just wanted to sit in their apartment, and there were those who wanted to venture out, and there were those at the bar, and there were those on the liquor store, and there were those in the street, and there was this dog running around, and even there's a kind of like a viewpoint from the dog sitting there kind of sighing, listening to all these folks talk around him. I don't want to give too much around the plot, but it gives it another dimension to the book. And I have to, really tip my hat to Tarantino. Not that he needs my hat to tip to him, but to do that in cinema translated to me in the book.
Would you entertain the book being transformed into a movie or a series of some sort?
Yeah, I think I didn't think about that when I was writing the book. To your point, I think after the book was done and some people that I kind of give a first read to, what were they thinking? They said, this is like a movie, or this has elements. Even my agent at the time said, this is a bigger thing, and let's do it right and get it out there. And again, I still don't look. I just want to be a writer. I love crafting stories, and I really love the printed page, and that's where my heart is. And it's not about money or anything to me. That's not really where my head was at. But at the end of the day, if a Netflix or a Prime or I think a streaming service or something like that, I don't think it translates to broadcast TV, but if an HBO or one of these folks want to come by, and I think that I would love to see it. If it's done, to the book, where they really want to get into the characters' heads and really create the Cypress Avenue, I'd be thrilled at that, the prospect of that. Absolutely. I know some writers like Stephen King have really regretted signing the rights away to their book after that. But I think if it's done properly and you're with the right director and the studio, you can do it properly.
Yeah, Stephen King's interesting. The one movie he directed was his worst movie, Maximum Overdrive. And the one movie that he hates, The Shining, is probably the best Stephen King movie.
It might be his masterpiece, right? I agree with that. It's funny. I like Stephen King's shorter stories. So, like The Night Shift, like that collection he put together.
I love. Jerusalem's Lot is in that.
So beautiful.
I Am the Doorway with the eyes in the hand. Oh, that's so cool.
Such spooky stuff, man. He really was on fire in that book, in my opinion. And a little, throwback to what we were speaking about earlier with Creepshow. He makes a Creepshow too. He's the truck driver in the, thanks for the ride, lady episode segment. That's in it. He's the actual truck driver.
Yeah. He has a whole segment in the first movie.
Oh, yes, that's right. That too, yes. Absolutely. You're right. I forgot about that. Duh.
Yeah.
But, it's, King is another one of those guys that I feel like are a little overlooked, one of my favorite writers. So I would say the authors that I really would resonate with are more of the I would say Hemingway or Kerouac or Bukowski, and then I like some of the more. I love Emily Dickinson's poetry. That's just somebody I just really enjoy. Cormac McCarthy has been an author. He wrote The Road, and Blood Meridian and No Country for Old Men. Just somebody that really strips the writing down to bare bones and can really make you feel pain and suffer and happiness at the same time. And those are the writers that I think are more palatable to what I'm doing right now. But Stephen King, I'm not. He's definitely in my top 20.
All right. Well, hey, listen, it's always been fun chatting with you. Look forward to this. What's the name of the sequel that's coming out, or the sister companion book to? And what's the time frame on that one?
Yeah, great. So that is in production right now. And I'm in the writing process right now. The title of the book again is "Fine is Flying Without You," which is like I said, it's going to be set in the same literary world. And you may get appearances from some of the characters in A Slow Midnight. I don't know the time frame on it. I would like to hope. I hope that Permuted will stick with what I'm trying to do here and put these two together, and maybe they sell together at some point. But that's the plan. And I don't know the time frame. I'm hoping. I'm kind of quarter way through the book, and I've already have it mapped out. I know where I'm going with it. And like I said, I'm sitting on a bunch of other stuff that I don't want to give away, but that are not related to this. And I'd love, Russ, we'll talk offline about one of these ideas, and I would love to get your thoughts on it because I think it has legs. It's just going to be a labor to write. But outside of that, these, I have the Slow Mid on Cypress Avenue, which I'm super proud of. I'm hawking it right now. Everybody go out and buy it. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Nobles. I saw it on Walmart. It's on all indie bookstores. You can find it all over the place. You can find me on the internet on Twitter at Mike Figs, on Instagram at Mike A Figs, and same thing on Facebook, Mike A Figs, A in the middle. And I'd love to hear from you guys. Definitely check out the book. I'm hoping to get this next one out, by next year. I mean, that would be the plan. And hopefully we'll be able to promote it properly. But it's always a treat to be with you. I love that we can talk about baseball and science fiction and literary arts and pizza and all the other stuff. All the other roads you brought me down on this program. It's you do a good program, and it's great to be a part of it.
We can't talk about baseball because you can't accept that the Yankees are superior to the Mets in every single way.
That's exactly why you went to the Bronx. You weren't there to eat pizza. You were there to see the Yankees. And
I did see the Yankees, and I saw them beat the Mets 3-2. By the way,
yeah, I'm sure you did. Some steroid pitcher on the mound.
What do you think of what's our new guy now, Aaron Judge? What do you think of Aaron Judge?
Oh, Aaron Drugs? Oh, absolutely. He is steroiding beyond belief. And he only met who was it? Moda was the only Met you can point to that was a steroid user. Besides that, and Cabrera, who's a ex-Yankee, by the way. But that's the problem. Listen, I will always love old school Yankees. Mickey Mantle, even in the 80s, the Guidrys, and the 70s with Guidry and the 70s teams, and Dave Righetti and Donnie Baseball. I mean, we've talked about this before. Don Mattingly is a nice man, a true, should be in the Hall of Fame in my opinion, because had his it's same thing like other players that are in the Hall of Fame right now that had their career shortened. He would be there had it not been for the back injuries. He really would have been there, and he just had his career cut short. So but I think what happened, why I don't like the Yankees so much, was the buying the players, stacking your team, putting all these guys on that are on steroids and drugs and hitting home runs. But I mean, that's just me, and I'm a disgruntled Mets fan. What do you want from me?
Well, you're officially banned from the program.
Again? Damn.
Yeah. Mike Figliola, thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Hey, Rush, you're a good friend. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to speaking to you again.